Okay, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank all of you for joining today's webinar. My name is Greg Metcalf, and I am the president here at Vivid Supply. Excuse me. As a trusted face mask and isolation gown supplier, we appreciate the opportunity to provide you with this education regarding the upcoming ASTM and AAMI standard changes. For today's webinar, I will be providing a brief introduction to Vivid Supply. We will discuss the ASTM and AAMI standards, what they look like, and how they may impact you and your teams. And we will have time for a Q&A period at the end. So if you have a question, feel free to add it to the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce our team of experts on the call today. We have Io Alade, our product manager of facial protection, and Philip Lee, our associate product manager for apparel. Vivid Supply is a globally diversified manufacturer that forges strong partnerships that provide unprecedented supply chain security and visibility. We combine product protections with comfort to drive compliance, making hospitals a safer place to visit and to work. And with that, I will hand it over to Io, our product manager of facial protection.
Thank you so much, Greg. It's really great to be here to share more about the upcoming or the ASTM and AAMI standard change that's already here. I'll be sharing the ASTM portion, and I'll pass it off to my awesome colleague Phil to touch on AAMI. So first of all, what are ASTM standards? ASTM is the global standard organization that defines the performance for medical face masks. And there are 5 criteria that are taken into account. We have the flame spread, fluid resistance to synthetic blood, differential pressure, also known as delta P, bacterial filtration efficiency, also known as BFE, and particle filtration efficiency, also known as PFE. So in conjunction with the FDA's acknowledgement of ASTM F2100-23, which is effective this July 2025, Vivid Supply will transition from F2100-21 to F2100-23. The new standard, F2100-21, impacts just the particle filtration efficiency testing, and it specifies the new PFE levels for medical masks. The test methodology for PFE will change from F2299 to F3502, making it more rigorous. It's also important to note that Vivid Supply masks have been tested and meet the PFE requirements for the new method with no changes necessary to any of our masks or materials. So let's unpack what PFE means. It simply measures a mask's ability to filter submicron particles with the expectations that viruses will be filtered in a similar manner. In the next slide, I'll talk about the key changes to the PFE testing under the new standard. Now I've broken those into 3 key buckets. First, let's talk about particle filtration size. Under the current standard, ASTM did not specify the particle size to be used during testing. However, they did recommend a range of 0.1 to 5 microns. With the new ASTM change, they have specified that the particle size to be used for testing will now be at 0.3 microns. Now, this change will help to ensure uniformity in testing across all labs. And just as a side note, Vivid Supply used the 0.1 micron testing under the current ASTM standard, which is to be phased out. This 0.3 particle size is significant because it represents the worst case scenario for filtration, making it even harder for masks to pass the test. And I'll touch base on that in later slides. The next is the standard flow rate. The current ASTM standard did not specify a standard flow rate during testing. However, with the new standard, ASTM has specified a standardized airflow rate at 60 liters per minute. This standardization ensures consistent testing conditions across different labs, improving results reliability and comparability. And finally, we have comparability to N95 test methodology. The change to the particle filtration size at 0.3 microns and the standardized flow rate at 60 liters per minute now align more closely to N95 test methodology. Well, this is because N95 also uses a particle size of 0.3 testing at 0.3 and a standardized flow rate at 85 liters per minute. These similarities now make it easier for end users to understand and now compare mask performances. The most abstract of the 3 points that I have listed above is the 0.3 micron size in testing filtration efficiency, and I will break that down in later slides. So to better grasp this concept, we need to understand how a filter works in the first place. Filtration is captured in 4 ways, as we see on the screen. Inertia impaction, interception, diffusion, and electrostatic attraction. First, inertia impaction. This helps with filtering large particles. Now, large or heavy particles can't easily change direction in the airflow. So what happens when they pass through a filter is they crash into the filter fibers and they get trapped. The best way to think about this is imagine you're riding a bike really fast and suddenly a sharp turn appears. Now, if you're going too fast, you might not be able to turn in time and then crash into a wall. Large or heavy particles in the air do the same thing. Because they can't follow the airflow's curves, they crash into the filter fibers and they get trapped. Next is interception. This also has to do with filtering large particles as well, and it's pretty simple. When particles come close to a filter fiber, they stick to it. So, like walking through grass that has burrs and they stick to your clothes. Now, these burrs don't necessarily hit you head on, but they get close enough to cling to the fabric. So similarly, when particles pass close to a filter fiber, they stick to it and get captured. Next is diffusion. This helps with capturing smaller particles. Tiny particles move in a zigzag pattern in the air because molecules keep bumping into them. So think of a little child running through a crowd. They're most likely going to get pushed around by adults or bigger kids. So like the little kids, the smaller particles get bumped around in a zigzag pattern and eventually hit a filter fiber where they get trapped. And the last is electrostatic attraction. This helps with filtering both large and smaller particles. Charged particles are pulled towards oppositely charged filter fibers, which helps to trap them. So think rubbing a balloon on your hair, and your hair stands and sticks to the balloon because of the static electricity. So similarly, when particles in the air have an opposite charge to the filter fibers, they get pulled in and they stick to the filter, no matter their sizes. And once a particle gets stuck in the filter, it's incredibly hard to remove them. So why is 0.3 micron size the Goldilocks size? This is simply because it's the hardest to trap, because none of the main filtering methods, interception, impaction, diffusion, or electrostatic attraction work very well on it. It's also dubbed the most penetrating particle size. According to the new ASTM standards, filters will now be tested using this size, because if a filter can effectively capture out these tricky particles, it will perform even better at capturing both smaller and larger particles. So if you look at the image on the screen, we see that the filter efficiency is higher at the lower micron size. It dips right at 0.3 micron size, and eventually the efficiency rises again for larger particle size. So going back to the ASTM standard, what we see on the screen is a representation of the difference between the current ASTM standard to be phased out and the new ASTM standard. For the current ASTM standard, typically tested at 0.1 micron size, we see level 1 at 95% and level 2 and 3 at 98%. However, with the updated standard now being tested at 0.3 micron size, we see level 1 now at 80% and level 2 and 3 now at 85%. And there's a perfectly good reason for that. This is simply because the tests have gotten stricter. Also note that these changes in percentage do not impact the effectiveness of the masks filtering out particulates, and they filter just as well as using the current ASTM standard and the new ASTM standard in testing PFE. So why is this transition important? This is simply because it helps to improve the reliability and comparability of test results across different masks and different laboratories. It also aims to provide end users with a clear understanding of mask performances, and it facilitates informed decision-making by the users. So what we see on the screen, for those who are familiar with Vivid Supply's artwork, is a standard level 1 artwork. We now see that the level 1, according to the artwork, PFE is now at 80%. We have also included a barcode on the artwork where when you scan the barcode, it takes you to a landing page where you can learn more about the changes that have happened with ASTM. So it's also important to note that even though the test methodology might have changed, the quality of Vivid Supply masks have not changed. All Vivid Supply manufactured masks continue to exceed the requirement of both ASTM F2100-21 and ASTM F2100-23, maintaining the reliable protection you can expect. Now I'm going to pass it on to Phil to talk more about the AAMI standard change.
Awesome, thanks, Ayo. It's a pleasure to present to you all today. As mentioned, my name is Philip. In terms of gown changes, it's much more on the lighter side. In the world of gowns here at Vivid Supply, our guiding compass is the industry standard, which is the AAMI PB70. Just as a reminder of the standard, it does cover 3 aspects. First is minimum barrier performance requirements for gowns, specifically against fluids and other harmful substances. Secondly, it handles classification, So basically, what type of gown is being used. And lastly, labeling or packaging. So much like with ASTM, Vivid Supply is acknowledging AAMI PB70 2022 this month in conjunction with the FDA. We can ultimately condense the changes into two categories. First is the classification. So the standard is now expanding to include additional styles of gowns that can be considered AAMI rated. Likewise, there are now packaging requirements. So all labels must contain the expiry date and indicate the style of gown that's being sold. So the table that we have here just as a quick summary of the changes we see from the previous standard to the new. So in terms of AAMI rated gowns, previous standard had AAMI claims only applying to full back coverage gowns. And now with the change here, it does open AAMI claims to apply to additional styles. So not only full back, but also open back and non-protective back, which we'll go into in the next slide. Likewise for labeling, previous standard had no requirements in terms of expiry date. So from a procurement standpoint, stockpile standpoint, that was causing issues. So the standard now includes the requirement for an expiry date and also, again, indicate what type of gown is being sold. Last part of the table just discusses decontamination gowns, which should be a point of interest for anyone working with the SPD. So decontamination gowns now have explicit requirements to be at minimum AAMI level 3 or greater. So I just want to do a quick overview on the new gown designs. So the one on the left is the non-protective back. We actually don't see this very often in the market. It's essentially identifies itself as having no AAMI rated back coverage, even though it may physically have a full back. So there could be holes, perforations, slits, or the back panels don't overlap. This very much exists because what we're used to is the design in the middle, which is the full back coverage gown. So that's full AAMI rated coverage, both in the back and the front, with none of the variables that the non-protective back gown has. So basically we're seeing this kind of identified so that AAMI is enforcing full back coverage to actually mean full back coverage. And then last design is on the right, the open back gown. So AAMI added this into the standard as it was really commonly seen in acute care already. So as many of you clinicians know, breathability can be a cause for concern when wearing gowns for long periods of time, and this design really helps alleviate that. So open back gowns allow clinicians to be confident of the protection in the front of the gown, perfect for situations where fluid resistance in the back isn't required. So just a quick refresher on the AAMI ratings here, and I'm not going to go into any of the technical, so don't need to worry about that. Biggest takeaway here is we have AAMI level 1 to 4. The higher the number, the higher the fluid resistance. Caveat is that depending on the style of gowns that we saw in the previous slide, it can come at the detriment of breathability due to how heavy like level 3 or level 4 material can get. So that's where bringing it back to the open back gown design, really helpful in situations where, you know, it's a level 3 or level 4 gown, gives you more breathability there. So ultimately, why is AAMI doing this transition? So with these new classifications, this allows AAMI to expand the gown styles already commonly seen in acute care beyond just the full back coverage gowns. Ultimately, this benefits all of you clinicians by providing greater clarity on which gowns to use, when and where. We also have additional labeling requirements in place now. Really helps you understand how long the product will be effective and safe to use, and really just aligns gowns with the rest of PPE, as masks and gloves already had expiry dates and all of that. So just want to put everything I said towards the labels that we now have for our respective gowns. So you can see all the identification there, the style and the back coverage. And then likewise, the red box in the bottom right just highlights the manufacturing date and expiry date as well. So ultimately, on the gown side, again, it's pretty simple. There's no changes on the testing requirements or anything like that. So our gowns here in Vivid Supply exceed both AAMI PB70 2012 and PB70 2022. ultimately for clinicians like yourselves, it just gives you guys more options to meet your protection needs. And with that being said, I'll pass it back to Greg here. He'll handle the Q&A period.
Terrific. Thanks, Phil. And thank you, Io, both of you, for sharing your expertise. We do have time for a few questions, as I mentioned at the front of the webinar. If we don't get to your question, your Vivid Supply representative will reach out to you after the webinar. Alternatively, if you have questions after the webinar has ended, you may submit your questions via email to marketing@vividsupply.com. In addition, if you are interested in a one-pager that outlines the changes that you can share with your team, leave a comment in the chat and our team will reach out to you. So I think we've got some questions that are coming in. So I will ask Phil and Io to go ahead and rejoin me, as they are the experts that will be answering the questions. Okay, the first question. Are test results available for the different mask models for the updated ASTM standards? So I'll let Io answer that, please.
It's a really good question, Greg. Yes, we do have test results available. They are typically between 90 to 95%, which is above and beyond the requirement of the new ASTM standards and the old ASTM standard.
Terrific. Next question. What are the expiry dates on Vivid Supply gowns? That sounds like a Phil question.
Yeah, no, thanks, Greg. It's pretty typical what we see in the market. So our AAMI Level 2 gowns have a 5-year expiry date, and then everything else, so our AAMI Level 3, 4, and chemo gown are 3-year expiry.
Thanks, Phil. Another question. Does the neck closure affect the AAMI rating? Phil, please.
No, another good one. It wouldn't affect the AAMI rating. You could have like an overhead level 4, or necktie, tape tab, hook and loop level 4 as well.
Terrific. Thanks again. Okay, it looks like we've got time for one last question. Again, if we did not get to your question, someone from our team will reach out to you. The last question that we'll take is, when can we expect the new artwork flowing into facilities? Io, would you like to take that, please?
Yeah, of course. That's a really interesting one. You can expect the new artwork to flow in pretty much starting from July until the end of the year. So that would really depend on the SKUs that you have, because if you have a lot of days of hand of that SKU, obviously that would have to be depleted first before new artwork can flow in. But also note that for the ASTM standard, it really is about products coming into the country after July 2025. So if you currently have stock of products that don't have the new artwork, that's perfectly okay to use, not going to get flagged by the FDA. It really is about products coming into the country after July 2025.
Fantastic. Thanks, Io. So with that, we will go ahead and conclude the webinar. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you.